Switzerland is voting on whether to cap its population at 10 million people. And if it passes, cross-border workers could be directly affected. Here's what you need to know. On June 14th this year, 2026, Swiss citizens will vote on an initiative called Pas de Suisse à 10 millions. In English, no Switzerland of 10 million, also known as the Sustainability Initiative. So the goal is simple. Ensure Switzerland's population never exceeds 10 million people. But behind that number lies a much bigger debate about immigration, housing, the economy, and Switzerland's relationship with the European Union. But also, if Switzerland wants to stay below 10 million people, does it mean it will stop granting citizenship? Well, one question I had about this initiative was whether it would affect naturalization. The answer appears to be no. Well, at least not directly. The initiative focuses on limiting the population growth, and it's not about changing the Swiss citizenship laws. But however, if future immigration rules become stricter, fewer people might ultimately stay in Switzerland long enough to qualify for naturalization. Okay, so first, for some context, Switzerland currently has around 9 million residents. Since the EU Free Movement Agreement came into force in 2002, the population has grown by roughly 1.7 million. About 80% of that growth is directly linked to immigration. That immigration has helped Switzerland fill critical labor shortages. Hospitals, research institutions, construction companies, hotels, and many sectors depend on workers recruited from abroad. But it has also created real pressure. Housing costs have become really, really high, especially in the major cities. The roads are overcrowded, the trains are overcrowded, green spaces are shrinking because there's always some construction taking place. So these tensions are exactly what this initiative is responding to. So what does the initiative actually propose? Well, it sets two population thresholds. The first is the 9.5 million residents, which Switzerland could reach as early as 2031. And at that point, the government would be required to act. It would tighten immigration rules. It would review asylum policy, and it will also adjust the family reunification criteria. The second threshold is the 10 million. If that limit is ever crossed, the government will be required to use every available measure to bring the population back down, including renegotiating or terminating international agreements. And this is where it gets critical for Frontaliers. The free movement agreement between Switzerland and the EU is part of a larger package called the bilateral agreements. And these bilateral agreements, they cover trade, transport, research, and market access. And because of what's known as the guillotine clause, if the free movement agreement is terminated, then the other agreements in the package could fall as well. So for cross-border workers, this is not an abstract legal question. It directly affects your right to work in Switzerland while living in France or any other border country. So supporters of this initiative argue that Switzerland's current pace of growth is simply unsustainable. Around 100,000 people arrive each year through EU immigration, through third country migration, and the asylum system. They say housing demand will never catch up with supply at this rate, and that the quality of life is being quietly eroded. They insist that this initiative is not about closing Switzerland's borders. They argue that Switzerland can still welcome qualified workers, just at a more controlled and sustainable pace. And the opponents of this initiative, which includes the Federal Council and the Parliament, they recommend rejecting this initiative. So their argument is that Switzerland's economy depends on foreign workers, and restricting immigration too aggressively could worsen labor shortages across critical sectors. They also argue that housing and infrastructure issues can be solved through targeted policy without placing a hard cap on human beings or the population. And crucially, they warn that triggering the guillotine clause could damage Switzerland's economic position and complicate security cooperation with its EU partners. So this vote raises questions that go far beyond Switzerland. Like, how much population growth is actually sustainable? How do you balance economic needs with housing availability and quality of life? How much immigration is necessary and how much is too much? There are no easy answers, and even reasonable people disagree on this initiative. But here's my personal take. As someone who lives abroad and who lives this cross-border life, I understand both sides of the debate. Switzerland has genuinely benefited from international talent and foreign workers. And at the same time, the pressure on housing and infrastructure is real. People are not imagining it. So all in all, the Swiss citizens will get to decide, not the politicians, not the lobbyists, the people. But also sometimes the average person might not fully understand the consequences of this initiative. So in any case, on June 14th, the Swiss people will decide on two very different visions of the country's future. And whatever is decided, it will affect all of us on both sides of the border. So if you're a Frontalier or an expat, this vote matters to you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know where you stand. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.